The wrench slipped from Marcus Chen's oil-stained fingers as the blast doors of Epsilon Station shuddered under another impact. Through the reinforced viewport of Bay 7, he watched the sleek silver ships of the Caliph Empire dance between the station's defensive turrets like predators toying with wounded prey. Their weapons carved brilliant scars across the darkness of space, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the station intact. They wanted the people alive. That made them more dangerous than any mindless destroyer. Another direct hit to the Eastern Shield generators, announced the station's AI in its maddeningly calm voice. Structural integrity at 73%. All non-essential personnel should proceed to emergency shelters immediately. Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and glanced at the massive freight hauler he'd been repairing. The ship belonged to Captain Zara Voss, a human trader who'd limped into Epsilon Station 3 days ago with a blown hyperdrive and a cargo hold full of rare earth minerals from the outer rim. She'd been nothing but professional when she'd contracted his services, though he'd caught her watching him work with those sharp green eyes of hers. There was something about her that reminded him of someone from a life he'd left behind, but he couldn't quite place what it was. The freight bay's comm system crackled to life. All civilians, this is Commander Thorne of Epsilon Station Defense. We are under attack by Caliph forces. Repeat, we are under hostile action. Maintain positions and await further instructions. Marcus had heard Commander Thorne's voice before, usually when the man was drunk and bragging about his military service at Roscoe's bar. The commander had never seen real combat, and it showed in the tremor barely concealed beneath his authoritative tone. The Caliph hadn't chosen Epsilon Station by accident. It was a border outpost with minimal defenses, populated mostly by traders, miners, and people who wanted to disappear into the frontier. People like Marcus. The bay doors hissed open and Captain Voss strode in, her long dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail and a plasma rifle slung across her shoulder. She moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with violence, though Marcus had initially assumed it was just the natural confidence of a successful trader. Looking at her now, with her jaw set in determination and her eyes scanning for threats, he realized his first assessment might have been incomplete. "Chen," she called out, not breaking stride as she headed toward her ship. "How's my hyperdrive looking? Please tell me you've got good news." Marcus set down his tools and turned to face her. "The motivator coils were completely fried, but I managed to source compatible replacements from the station's salvage yard. The drive will hold together long enough to get you to the next system, but you'll want to do a full rebuild when you reach a proper shipyard." "That'll have to do." Zara activated her ship's cargo ramp with a gesture. "The Caliph are jamming long-range communications, but I picked up fragments of emergency broadcasts before they started their attack. This isn't just a raid. They're systematically hitting every human settlement in this sector." Another explosion rocked the station, this one close enough to make the deck plating vibrate under their feet. Through the viewport, Marcus could see that 2 of the station's 6 defensive turrets had gone dark. The Caliph ships moved closer, their formation tightening like a noose. "You should get to the emergency shelters," Marcus said, though something in Zara's posture told him she had no intention of hiding. "The Caliph don't usually harm civilians if they surrender peacefully." Zara paused at the base of her ship's ramp and gave him a look that was part amusement and part something darker. "You seem to know a lot about Caliph tactical doctrine for a station mechanic." The comment was casual enough, but Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He'd been careful to build his cover identity over the past 2 years, creating a perfectly mundane background that would satisfy any casual inquiry. But there was something in Zara's tone that suggested her interest might not be casual at all. "I read the news feeds," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. "The Caliph have been expanding their territory for months. Their pattern is pretty consistent." "Consistent." Zara nodded slowly. "That's an interesting word choice. Most people would say predictable or brutal. But consistent suggests you've been paying attention to their methodology." Before Marcus could respond, the lights in the bay flickered and went out. Emergency illumination cast everything in a red glow that made shadows dance across the bulkheads. The station's AI spoke again, its artificial calm finally cracking slightly. "Hull breach detected in sections C7 through C12. Emergency force fields are holding. All personnel in affected areas should evacuate immediately. Zara was already moving, her rifle coming up in a practiced motion as she scanned the darkened bay. They're coming aboard. The question is whether they're after the station's resources or looking for someone specific. Marcus felt his carefully constructed new life beginning to crumble around the edges. For 2 years, he'd been nobody special. Marcus Chen, freelance mechanic, former cargo handler who'd saved up enough credits to buy his own tools and set up shop on a frontier station. The identity was solid because most of it was true. He really had been a cargo handler, once upon a time, though that job had been aboard a very different kind of ship. "Captain," he said, making a decision that part of him knew he'd regret. "There's something you should know about your hyperdrive repair." She was checking the charge on her rifle's power cell, but her eyes flicked up to meet his. "What about it?" "I didn't just replace the motivator coils. I upgraded them. Military-grade components that will give you twice the standard jump range and cut your charging time in half." Marcus moved to his toolkit and opened a concealed compartment, revealing equipment that definitely didn't belong to a civilian mechanic. "The question is, are you planning to run or fight?" For a long moment, Zara studied him with those sharp green eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of satisfied understanding. "I knew there was something different about you. The way you move, the way you analyze problems, even the way you organize your workspace. You've got training." "Had training," Marcus corrected. Past tense. "I'm retired." "Funny thing about retirement," Zara said, shouldering her rifle and starting up the cargo ramp. "It never seems to stick when the shooting starts." Marcus looked at his tools, at the modest life he'd built in the grease and grime of Epsilon Station's maintenance bays. 2 years of peace. 2 years of fixing other people's problems instead of creating his own. It had been a good run. He grabbed his concealed equipment and followed Zara aboard her ship. The interior of her freight hauler was larger than it had appeared from outside, and Marcus quickly realized that several of the cargo containers were actually sophisticated electronics disguised to look like standard shipping modules. As Zara moved toward the cockpit, her fingers danced across hidden control panels with the familiarity of long practice. "So," Marcus said, settling into the co-pilot seat as Zara began her pre-flight sequence. "What's a traitor doing with military-grade sensor arrays and what looks suspiciously like a concealed weapons system?" Zara's hands never paused in their work, but Marcus caught the ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "What's a mechanic doing with classified Caliph tactical assessments and Federation Special Forces tool configurations?" They both had their secrets, then. Marcus found that oddly comforting. "Fair enough. So where exactly are we going once we clear the station?" "That depends," Zara said, bringing the ship's main engines online. Through the cockpit viewport, they could see Caliph soldiers in powered armor moving through the station's corridors like silver insects. "On whether you're really as retired as you claim to be." The freight hauler lifted off its landing cradles with unusual smoothness for a civilian vessel. As they cleared the bay and entered open space, Marcus got his first clear look at the attacking fleet. 6 Caliph cruisers in a standard siege formation, plus what looked like 2 full squadrons of assault shuttles. It was massive overkill for a border station like Epsilon. "They're not here for the station," Marcus said, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place in his mind. "This is way too much firepower for a simple raid. They're after something specific." "Someone specific," Zara corrected, adjusting their course to avoid the attention of the nearest Caliph patrol. "The question is whether that someone is you or me." Marcus felt the old instincts kicking in despite himself. Pattern recognition. Threat assessment. The cold analytical mindset that had kept him alive through 6 years of classified operations before he'd decided he'd seen enough death for one lifetime. "How long have you known?" "About me, I mean." "I started suspecting when you quoted Federation regulation numbers while explaining why you needed to recalibrate my NAV computer." "Most mechanics don't have Fleet Technical Manual 7 Alpha memorized." Zara brought up a long-range scanner display. "But I became certain when I saw you unconsciously check for concealed weapons before approaching my ship for the first time." "It's a very specific behavioral pattern." "And you?" "Let me guess." Independent intelligence contractor? Corporate security? Or are you still active duty something? Instead of answering directly, Zara transmitted a coded sequence that made Marcus's blood run cold. It was a Federation Special Operations authentication code, but not just any code. It was a Black Fleet identifier, the kind used by units that officially didn't exist. Captain Zara Voss, she said formally. Federation Intelligence, Deep Cover Operations Division. And you, Marcus Chen, are Admiral Marcus Chen, former commanding officer of the Federation's Prometheus Task Force. The man who disappeared 2 years ago after leading the most successful Black Ops campaign in Federation history. Marcus closed his eyes. Of all the freight pilots on all the frontier stations in all the galaxy, he'd had to pick the one who worked for Federation intelligence. I'm not Admiral Chun anymore. That man died at the Battle of Kepler's Gate along with his crew. No, Admiral. That man went underground and became very good at fixing hyperdrives. But the Caliph Empire has been systematically hunting down every member of the Prometheus Task Force for the past 18 months. They've found most of them. Zara's voice was gentle but implacable. They're here for you. Through the viewport, Marcus could see Caliph assault shuttles moving away from Epsilon Station and spreading out in a search pattern. They weren't interested in the station's cargo or its people. They were looking for him. How did they find me? He asked, though part of him already knew the answer. They didn't. I did. Zara met his eyes steadily. Federation Command has been looking for you for 2 years, Admiral. They need the Prometheus files. All of them. The Prometheus files. Marcus had hoped those particular ghosts would stay buried. The complete tactical analysis of Caliph Empire military capabilities, including their classified weapons systems, fleet compositions, and strategic doctrine. Information gathered during 18 months of deep penetration missions that had cost him his ship, his crew, and very nearly his sanity. The files died with my ship, Marcus said. The Caliph made sure of that when they destroyed the Prometheus at Kepler's Gate. With respect, Admiral, Federation intelligence believes otherwise. Our analysis suggests you had enough time to transmit the data before your ship was destroyed. The question is where you sent it. Marcus felt the weight of old decisions pressing down on him. Outside, the Caliph's ships were moving into a tighter search formation. Soon they would detect Zara's ship despite her efforts to mask their signature. When that happened, there would be nowhere left to run. Captain Voss, he said formally. I need to know exactly what authority you're operating under and what your orders are regarding my extraction. My orders are to locate you and secure your cooperation in retrieving the Prometheus files. The Federation is facing the largest Caliph offensive in 20 years, and without that intelligence data, we're fighting blind. Zara's hands moved over her controls, adjusting their course toward the edge of the system. The good news is that my extraction authority comes with some significant resources. The bad news is that the Caliph found you first. A proximity alarm began chiming softly. On the scanner display, one of the Caliph cruisers had changed course and was moving to intercept them. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the alien ship would be in weapons range. There's something else, Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. Federation intelligence believes the Caliph aren't just hunting Prometheus survivors for revenge. They think you discovered something during your deep cover operations. Something they're very eager to keep secret. Marcus thought about the last mission. The one that had gone so catastrophically wrong. The Caliph research facility hidden in the Vega Nebula. The things they'd found there. The reason he'd made the decision to disappear rather than return to Federation space with his report. Captain Voss, he said quietly. I need you to understand something. The reason I never came back wasn't because I was hiding from the Caliph. I was hiding from the Federation. Before Zara could respond, their ship's communication system activated with an incoming transmission. The voice that filled the cockpit was cultured, precise, and utterly without warmth. Human vessel, this is War Commander Theklos of the Caliph Imperial Fleet. You are ordered to cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. We know you carry the one we seek. Surrender the criminal Chen, and you will be permitted to depart unharmed. Zara muted the transmission and turned to Marcus. Criminal? What exactly did you do during those deep cover missions, Admiral? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the Caliph's ships moving to surround them. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 2 years' worth of carefully buried guilt. I discovered that the Caliph Empire wasn't the real enemy. And I made sure the people who were really responsible couldn't use my crew as scapegoats when the truth came out. The Caliph transmission continued, War Commander Theklas's voice growing more insistent. Chen, we know you can hear us. Return what you stole from the Vega facility, and we will consider allowing your companion to survive what is coming. Zara stared at Marcus with dawning understanding. You didn't just gather intelligence on the Caliph. You stole something from them. Something important enough that they've spent 2 years hunting you across half the galaxy. I took evidence, Marcus said. Evidence of crimes that make the Caliph Empire look like saints by comparison. The scanner showed Caliph ships moving into attack formation. They were out of time for explanations. Captain Voss, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Are you here to extract me for Federation intelligence, or are you here to silence me for them? Zara's hand moved to her sidearm, and, for a moment Marcus thought he had his answer. Then, she drew the weapon and offered it to him grip first. Admiral Chen, I've been monitoring Federation communications for the past 3 months. I know they declared you rogue. I know they've issued termination orders. Her voice was steady, professional. But I also know what really happened to your crew at Kepler's Gate. I know they were murdered to cover up the Vega discovery. Marcus took the weapon, checking its charge automatically. Then, you know why I can't go back? No, Admiral. I know why you can't run anymore. The Caliph's ships opened fire. The first Caliph plasma bolts streaked past Zara's ship like angry red stars, close enough to make the hull plating groan under the electromagnetic stress. Marcus found himself sliding into the co-pilot seat with the fluid economy of motion that marked a lifetime of combat experience, his hands already reaching for control systems that weren't supposed to exist on a civilian freight hauler. Defensive systems online, he said, fingers dancing across what had appeared to be cargo manifest displays but were actually military-grade tactical interfaces. This is some very sophisticated camouflage, Captain. Thank you, Admiral. Zara threw their ship into a spiraling dive that would have torn apart any genuine cargo hauler, but her vessel rode the acceleration like it was built for it. The ship is designated as the merchant vessel Wandering Star, but her real name is FSS Phantom. She's a Federation intelligence deep cover platform. Marcus felt a familiar thrill as the ship's true capabilities came online around him. Hidden weapon systems, military sensor arrays, and engines that could outrun anything short of a Federation destroyer. It had been 2 years since he'd been aboard a ship designed for war, and he'd forgotten how much he missed the feeling of commanding something built for impossible odds. War Commander Theklas is persistent, Marcus observed as the Caliph cruiser adjusted course to follow their evasive maneuvers. He's been hunting me personally for 18 months. This isn't just about recovering stolen data anymore. It's personal for him. Any particular reason a Caliph war commander would have a grudge against you? Zara asked, bringing their ship around in a tight arc that put them temporarily behind one of Epsilon Station's communication arrays. The massive structure would provide cover for perhaps 30 seconds before the Caliph repositioned to reacquire them. Marcus called up the tactical display and studied the enemy formation. 6 cruisers, 2 destroyer escorts, and enough assault craft to capture a small moon. The Caliph had committed serious resources to this operation, which meant they were very concerned about what he might reveal. Theklas was the commanding officer of the research facility at Vega Nebula, Marcus said. The one I infiltrated during my final mission. When I left, I took more than just data files. What else did you take? Instead of answering directly, Marcus activated a concealed storage compartment built into his toolkit. Inside was a memory crystal no larger than his thumbnail, its surface swirling with imprisoned light. Even through the containment field, Zara could see that it held terabytes of information. Everything, Marcus said simply. Research data, communication logs, personnel files, and complete technical specifications for something called Project Nightfall. The Caliph weren't just conducting military research at Vega. They were building something that would make their current fleet look like children's toys. Zara's eyes widened as she processed the implications. You stole the blueprints for a Caliph superweapon? Not exactly. I stole proof that the Caliph were building the weapon for someone else. Someone who wanted it used against human colonies. Marcus secured the crystal back in its hiding place. The Caliph Empire isn't our real enemy, Captain. They're just the hired muscle. Their conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms as two Caliph destroyers emerged from behind Epsilon Station's main habitat ring. The alien ships had been lying in wait, and now they moved to box in the Phantom with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. We're about to have company, Zara announced, throwing power to the engines and pulling them into a steep climb relative to the station's orientation. I hope those defensive systems you mentioned include actual weapons. Marcus was already bringing the ship's concealed armaments online. Plasma cannons disguised as cargo handling equipment deployed from hidden compartments along the Phantom's hull, while what had appeared to be standard navigation arrays revealed themselves as military-grade targeting systems. The ship is armed, he confirmed, but we're outnumbered 6-1 by vessels that outclass us in every category except speed and maneuverability. Our best option is to run. Running isn't an option, Admiral. The Caliph have deployed interdiction fields across the entire system. Nothing gets in or out until they decide otherwise. Zara highlighted the tactical display, showing the energy barriers that would tear apart any ship attempting to jump to hyperspace. We're trapped here until this gets resolved one way or another. Marcus studied the enemy formation with the analytical mindset that had made him one of the Federation's most successful deep operations commanders. The Caliph were disciplined and professional, but they were also following predictable tactical doctrine. That gave him an advantage, assuming he was willing to use knowledge that officially didn't exist. Captain Voss, I need to ask you something important. How much do you know about the circumstances of my crew's death at Kepler's Gate? Zara's hands never paused in their work, but Marcus caught the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested he'd touched on something painful. Federation intelligence briefed me on the official version. Your ship was ambushed by Caliph forces while returning from a reconnaissance mission. The Prometheus was destroyed with all hands except for you. That's what the official reports say, yes. What do the unofficial reports say? That your ship was sabotaged by persons unknown. That someone wanted to ensure the Prometheus never made it back to Federation space. Zara brought them around in another evasive maneuver as Caliph plasma fire lit up the space around them. The prevailing theory is that the Caliph have infiltrated Federation command. Marcus felt the familiar weight of old secrets pressing down on him. For 2 years, he'd carried the truth alone, too dangerous to share and too important to forget. But now, with Caliph ships closing in and nowhere left to run, he found himself confronting the possibility that his silence might have been a mistake. Captain, the Caliph didn't infiltrate Federation command. Someone in Federation command hired the Caliph to destroy my ship and crew. Someone who knew exactly what we'd discovered at Vega and wanted to ensure it never became public knowledge. The words hung in the cockpit like an accusation. Zara was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what Marcus had just told her. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. You're suggesting that someone in our own government ordered the murder of Federation personnel to cover up their involvement with a hostile alien power? I'm not suggesting it, Captain. I'm stating it as fact. I have the communication logs to prove it. Marcus highlighted a section of the tactical display. 3 days before the Caliph ambush at Kepler's Gate, someone transmitted our exact position and mission timeline to Theklos. The transmission originated from Federation Command Headquarters on Luna. Before Zara could respond, their ship's communication system activated with another incoming transmission. This time the voice was human, crisp with the authority of high military rank. FSS Phantom, this is Admiral Sarah Morrison aboard the Federation cruiser Intrepid. You will cut your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded. Admiral Chen, you are hereby ordered to surrender yourself and all stolen materials to Federation custody. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Admiral Morrison had been his superior officer during the Prometheus missions. She'd also been the one who'd signed the orders sending his crew to their deaths at Kepler's gate. Well, Zara said grimly, this just became significantly more complicated. Through the viewport, they could see new ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Federation vessels, sleek and modern and bristling with weapons. They moved into formation with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves to support the Calath forces rather than oppose them. Admiral Morrison, Marcus said, activating the communication system. I have to say, I'm impressed by your dedication. 2 years of hunting me across the galaxy, and you still managed to arrive just in time to clean up the mess. Marcus. Morrison's voice carried a note of what might have been genuine regret. You should have stayed dead. It would have been easier for everyone involved. Easier for everyone involved in covering up your treason, you mean? Marcus was watching the tactical display as Federation and Calath ships moved into a coordinated formation. Tell me, Admiral, how long have you been selling out human colonies to alien interests? Did it start with Vega, or have you been at this for longer? You always were too clever for your own good, Marcus. Yes, I've been working with certain Calath elements for the past 5 years. But not for personal gain. Everything I've done has been for the greater good of humanity. The greater good? Marcus couldn't keep the incredulity out of his voice. You sold weapons technology that the Calath have been using to slaughter human colonists. How exactly does that serve the greater good? Because, Admiral Chen, humanity is losing this war. We've been losing it for 20 years, and the situation gets worse every day. The Calath Empire spans half the galaxy, and their technology is centuries ahead of ours. We can either find a way to coexist with them, or we can be exterminated as a species. Zara was listening to the exchange with growing alarm. She's talking about appeasement. About surrendering to the Calath in exchange for being allowed to survive as a client species. Not just surrender, Captain. Collaboration. Selected human populations working with the Calath to develop new technologies and explore new territories. It's the only viable path forward for our species. Morrison's voice took on the tone of someone explaining an obvious truth to children. The alternative is extinction. Marcus studied the combined Federation Calath fleet and felt pieces of the larger puzzle falling into place. Project Nightfall. The weapon the Calath were building at Vega. It's not designed to be used against human worlds. It's designed to be used against other Calath factions. The ones who oppose collaboration with humanity. Very good, Admiral. Yes, there's a civil war brewing within the Calath Empire. Progressive elements who believe in cooperation with younger species, and traditionalists who prefer the old ways of conquest and subjugation. We've been providing the progressives with advanced human technology in exchange for protection once they achieve victory. And the human colonies that have been destroyed by Calath raids? The ones using weapons you provided? Necessary sacrifices. Public opinion had to be shaped to accept the inevitability of Calath victory. A few frontier settlements were a small price to pay for ensuring the survival of our species. Zara's face had gone pale. Admiral Morrison, you're talking about genocide. About the systematic murder of human civilians to advance a political agenda. I'm talking about realism, Captain Voss. About making the hard choices that ensure humanity has a future, even if that future looks different than what we'd prefer. The communication channel fell silent for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the Phantom's engines. Marcus stared at the tactical display, watching Federation and Calath ships move into attack formation. Everything he'd believed about the war, about the nature of the conflict, had been wrong. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival against an alien empire. They were being sacrificed by their own leaders in a game of power politics that spanned the galaxy. Captain Voss, he said quietly, I need to ask you one more question. Whose side are you really on? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her hands moving over the ship's controls with mechanical precision. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would define the rest of her life. Admiral Chen, my orders were to extract you and secure the Prometheus files for Federation intelligence. But my oath was to protect humanity from all enemies, foreign and domestic. she turned to meet his eyes. I think it's time we reminded both the Federation and the Caliph what happens when they underestimate human resolve. Marcus felt something that had been broken inside him for 2 years beginning to heal. What did you have in mind, Captain? The Caliph fleet is powerful, but they're not expecting resistance from a single ship. And Admiral Morrison's forces are positioned to support the Caliph, not to fight independently. Zara brought up a schematic of the local space around Epsilon Station. But there's something both sides have overlooked. She highlighted a section of the display showing the station's massive cargo handling facilities. Epsilon Station processes her shipments from mining operations throughout this sector. That means they keep large quantities of refined metals in their storage bays. Marcus followed her reasoning and felt a cold smile spreading across his face. Metals that become highly unstable when exposed to plasma fire. Exactly. If we can trigger a chain reaction in the station's cargo bays, the explosion will be large enough to disable or destroy most of the ships in the immediate area. Zara met his eyes. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice Epsilon Station to stop this. Marcus thought about the thousands of civilian lives aboard the station. Then, he thought about the millions of lives that would be lost if Morrison's collaboration with the Caliph continued. Some choices were easier than others. Do it, he said. As the Phantom accelerated toward Epsilon Station's cargo bays, Marcus activated the ship's communication system one final time. All ships, this is Admiral Marcus Chen. I'm uploading the complete Prometheus files to all Federation frequencies. Everything we discovered about Project Nightfall, about the collaboration between Federation Command and Caliph Progressives, and about the systematic murder of human civilians to advance this agenda. He could see Morrison's ship changing course to intercept them, but it was too late. The data upload was complete, broadcasting across subspace to every Federation world and colony in range. Admiral Morrison, Marcus continued, you wanted to shape public opinion about the war. Let's see how the people of the Federation react when they learn the truth about whose side their leaders have really been fighting on. The Phantom screamed toward Epsilon Station's cargo bays, Caliph and Federation ships in pursuit. In the distance, space began to fill with new hyperspace signatures as the uploaded files triggered emergency responses from Federation forces throughout the sector. The war was about to change in ways that no one had expected. The explosion that tore through Epsilon Station's cargo bays lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. Marcus watched from the Phantom's cockpit as refined metals vaporized in temperatures that briefly rivaled a stellar core, sending shockwaves rippling outward in all directions. The blast caught 3 Caliph cruisers and 2 Federation destroyers in its expanding sphere of destruction, their shields collapsing under the sudden assault of superheated plasma and debris. Hull breach on the station's main habitat ring, Zara reported, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've got massive atmospheric bleeding. Casualty estimates are coming in at around 300 killed, 800 wounded. Marcus felt each number like a physical blow, but he forced himself to watch the tactical display with professional detachment. War always demanded terrible choices, and the choice between 300 lives and 3 million was no choice at all. Still, knowing he was right didn't make the weight any easier to bear. Admiral Morrison's flagship is moving to pursue, he said, highlighting the Federation cruiser as it accelerated through the expanding debris field. Her shields are holding, but she's taken damage to her forward weapon systems. More concerning is Theklos, Zara replied, bringing up a close-range scan of the Caliph War Commander's vessel. His ship was at the edge of the blast radius. Minimal damage, and he's moving to intercept us with 4 surviving cruisers. Through the Phantom's communication system, they could hear the chaos of multiple emergency broadcasts as ships throughout the system reacted to the uploaded Prometheus files. Federation captains were demanding clarification from their superiors. Colonial defense forces were activating emergency protocols. And, in the background, like a growing storm, came the voices of human civilians on worlds throughout the sector as news of the conspiracy spread through the communications networks. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Federation destroyer Valiant, came one transmission. Admiral Morrison, I'm requesting immediate clarification of your operational authority. The uploaded files suggest treasonous activity at the highest levels of command. Captain Rodriguez, you will maintain radio silence and continue your assigned mission parameters, Morrison responded, but there was strain in her voice now. The uploaded materials are fabricated enemy propaganda designed to undermine Federation unity. Negative, Admiral. I've had my technical staff analyze the authentication codes. These files are genuine Federation intelligence products. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of a man confronting an unthinkable betrayal. I'm withdrawing my ship from this operation pending full investigation of these allegations. Marcus watched as the destroyer Valiant peeled away from the combined Federation Caliph formation, followed moments later by two other ships whose captains were reaching similar conclusions. Morrison's carefully orchestrated operation was falling apart as the truth spread through the fleet. War Commander Theklos, Marcus said, activating a direct communication channel to the Caliph flagship. I believe it's time we had a conversation. The response came immediately, Theklos' cultured voice carrying undertones of barely controlled fury. Admiral Chen. You have caused considerable inconvenience with your theatrical demonstration. I prefer to think of it as providing clarity about the true nature of our conflict. Marcus studied the tactical display as the Caliph ships adjusted their formation. Tell me, War Commander, how does it feel to discover that your human allies have been manipulating you for their own purposes? You assume that we were unaware of Admiral Morrison's true agenda. Theklos' voice carried a note of cold amusement. The Caliph Empire has been dealing with treacherous humans for longer than your species has been capable of interstellar flight. We understand perfectly what Morrison and her faction represent. Zara looked up from her console with alarm. Admiral, I'm reading massive hyperspace signatures throughout the system. Something big is coming through. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as the scanner display filled with new contacts. Caliph ships, dozens of them, emerging from hyperspace in coordinated formation. But these weren't the sleek cruisers and destroyers of Theklos' fleet. These were massive dreadnoughts, vessels the size of small cities, bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to asteroid fields. The Caliph Imperial Third Fleet, Theklos announced with satisfaction. I believe you humans have an expression about bringing sufficient force to resolve a problem permanently. Morrison's voice cut across the communication channels, sharp with panic. War Commander, this wasn't part of our agreement. The operation was supposed to be limited in scope. Admiral Morrison, you have served your purpose admirably. Your collaboration allowed us to identify and eliminate the remaining Prometheus personnel while simultaneously causing your own species to lose faith in their military leadership. Theklos' tone carried the satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. But the time for collaboration has ended. The Caliph Empire will now proceed with the traditional solution to troublesome younger species. Marcus watched the massive Caliph dreadnoughts move into attack formation and understood with crystalline clarity what was about to happen. Morrison's faction had believed they were managing a controlled collaboration with progressive Caliph elements. In reality, they had been providing intelligence and tactical support to help the Caliph Empire prepare for a war of extermination. Captain Voss, he said quietly, I need you to transmit everything we have on the Vega research facility to every Federation frequency. Technical specifications, personnel records, communication logs. Everything. Admiral, the upload is already in progress, but I don't understand how that helps us against Third Fleet dreadnoughts. Zara's fingers flew across her controls as she transmitted terabytes of data to Federation forces throughout the sector. Those ships are designed to sterilize entire star systems. Because, Captain, the research at Vega wasn't just about building weapons for Caliph progressives. It was about building weapons that could destroy Caliph traditionalists. Marcus pulled up the technical specifications he'd memorized during his infiltration mission. Project Nightfall wasn't a superweapon. It was a network of automated defense platforms designed to protect human colonies from Caliph fleets exactly like the one we're facing. Understanding dawned in Zara's eyes. You're saying the Caliph built their own destruction? I'm saying that Morrison's people were too focused on political maneuvering to understand what they were really helping to create. The Caliph weren't just building weapons. They were testing them against human targets to ensure they would be effective against human Caliph hybrid defense systems. The communication system activated with a new voice, this one carrying the authority of Supreme Command. All human vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Catherine Torres aboard the Federation battleship Prometheus. We have received and authenticated the uploaded intelligence materials. All Federation forces are hereby ordered to immediately engage Caliph targets with extreme prejudice. Marcus felt a surge of hope as he recognized Torres's voice. She'd been his mentor during his early career, and if anyone could rally the Federation fleet for a desperate last stand, it would be her. But hope faded as he studied the tactical display. Even with Admiral Torres's intervention, the Federation forces in the system were outnumbered 10-1 by the Caliph dreadnoughts. "Admiral Torres," he transmitted, "this is Marcus Chen aboard the FSS Phantom. I need you to access the Vega research files and look for Project Nightfall defensive protocols. The Caliph built automated defense networks during their weapons testing, and some of those networks might still be active." "Marcus?" Torres's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Son, we've been looking for you for 2 years. Where the hell have you been?" "Learning to fix hyperdrives and questioning my life choices," Marcus replied. "Admiral, I don't have time to explain everything, but the Caliph have been using human colonies as test sites for anti-human weapons systems. Some of those systems included defensive networks designed to protect the test sites from interference. You're suggesting we can turn their own defenses against them?" "I'm suggesting that the Caliph Empire made the mistake of underestimating human ingenuity. The defensive networks they built were designed by human engineers working under duress. Engineers who built certain failsafes into the systems." Marcus highlighted a section of the Vega research files, showing technical specifications for the Project Nightfall defense platforms. Hidden within the complex technical documentation were subtle modifications, tiny alterations to command protocols that would be invisible to Caliph observers but could be exploited by someone who knew what to look for. "Captain Voss," he said, "I need you to transmit activation sequences to coordinates throughout this star system. The Caliph have been using this region as a testing ground for 3 years. If I'm right, there are hidden defense platforms throughout the asteroid fields and gas giant orbital zones." Zara's sensors detected the first activation almost immediately. A metallic asteroid that had been drifting unnoticed near the system's outer planet suddenly unfolded like a deadly flower, revealing weapon systems that had been disguised as natural rock formations. Moments later, another platform activated, then another, until space throughout the system was filled with hidden defensive installations. "War Commander Theklos," Marcus transmitted, "I believe you're familiar with the human concept of poetic justice?" The Caliph response came not in words but in action. The Third Fleet dreadnoughts opened fire on the nearest defense platforms with the coordinated precision of a military force that had been drilling for this exact scenario. But the platforms had been designed by humans who understood that Caliph tactics relied heavily on overwhelming firepower applied with mathematical precision. Instead of trying to match the dreadnought's raw destructive capacity, the defense platforms used mobility and deception. They moved like ghosts through the asteroid fields, appearing suddenly, to deliver precise strikes against Caliph shield generators before vanishing back into the cosmic debris. Each platform was small enough to be overlooked and fast enough to avoid retaliation, but together they swarmed the massive Caliph ships like angry insects. "This is impossible," Theklos transmitted, his cultured voice cracking with strain. "Our tactical analysis indicated that human defensive systems could not present a significant threat to Third Fleet assets." "Your tactical analysis was based on conventional Federation military doctrine," Marcus replied. "But the engineers who built those platforms weren't conventional Federation military personnel. They were Prometheus Task Force veterans who'd spent 2 years learning how to fight asymmetric warfare against superior Caliph forces. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. Massive Caliph dreadnoughts, vessels capable of reducing planets to rubble, found themselves under attack by invisible enemies that struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible. The defense platforms used the system's natural features as camouflage and cover, turning asteroids into weapons and gas giant atmospheres into shields. Admiral Morrison's remaining ships tried to withdraw from the engagement, but found their retreat blocked by Federation vessels loyal to Admiral Torres. The traitors who had collaborated with the Caliph found themselves trapped between their former allies and their former enemies, with nowhere left to run. "Admiral Morrison," Torres transmitted, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you will surrender your vessels immediately and prepare to be boarded. You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of Federation personnel." Morrison's response was defiant to the end. Admiral Torres, you're interfering with a classified operation authorized at the highest levels of Federation command. Stand down immediately or face court-martial. Admiral Morrison, the only court-martial anyone is facing today is yours. I have complete transcripts of your communications with Calath forces, including your orders to eliminate the Prometheus crew. You're done. As the battle raged around them, Marcus watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction. The Calath Third Fleet was powerful, but they were fighting a defensive network designed specifically to counter their tactical doctrine. Every move they made was anticipated, every strategy they employed was already accounted for in the platform's programming. Admiral Chen, Zara said, studying her sensor readings, I'm detecting something unusual about these defense platforms. They're not just using Federation technology. They're incorporating Calath systems as well. Marcus nodded grimly. The engineers at Vega had access to captured Calath equipment. They reverse-engineered the technology and incorporated it into the defense networks. The platforms aren't just using human tactics against Calath forces. They're using improved Calath technology against inferior Calath technology. The irony was perfect. The Calath Empire had provided human engineers with advanced technology, thinking they could control how it was used. Instead, those engineers had created weapons that turned the Calath's own superiority against them. War Commander Theklos, Marcus transmitted, I'm prepared to offer terms for your surrender. The response came after a long pause, Theklos' voice heavy with the weight of military defeat. What terms, Admiral Chen? Complete withdrawal of all Calath forces from human space. Immediate cessation of all hostile action against human colonies. And full reparations for the damage caused by your collaboration with the Morrison faction. And, in exchange? Marcus looked at the tactical display, where Calath dreadnoughts were being systematically dismantled by human defense platforms using their own technology. In exchange, War Commander, I'll consider allowing some of your ships to survive long enough to carry news of this defeat back to the Calath Empire. The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. When Theklos finally responded, his voice carried the resignation of a professional soldier who understood when the battle was truly lost. Admiral Chen, the Calath Empire accepts your terms. As Marcus watched the surviving Calath ships begin their withdrawal from human space, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years, hope for the future. The conspiracy that had nearly destroyed humanity from within had been exposed and defeated. The alien empire that had threatened human expansion into the galaxy had been broken by their own overconfidence. But, most importantly, the human spirit of innovation and determination had triumphed over seemingly impossible odds. They had taken the weapons of their enemies and turned them into tools of liberation. They had faced betrayal from their own leaders and emerged stronger and more united than before. Captain Voss, Marcus said, settling back in his chair with the first genuine smile he'd worn in years, I think it's time we headed home. The Federation is going to need experienced officers to help rebuild after this mess, and I'm tired of pretending to be just a mechanic. Zara returned his smile as she set course for Federation space. Admiral Chen, something tells me that the galaxy is about to learn exactly why they should never underestimate humanity's capacity for survival. Behind them, the defense platforms continued their silent vigil, protecting human space with technology that had been stolen from humanity's enemies and turned into the instruments of their defeat. It was, Marcus reflected, exactly the kind of poetic justice that made humans such a dangerous species to underestimate. The war was over. Humanity had won. And the galaxy would never be the same.